Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Record Live. I am running the show solo today, but I have a very special guest, Toby Clare. Welcome, Toby, to the show.
Thanks, Anita. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Some of us, a little fun fact for everyone watching on, Toby Clare actually, should we be calling you Pastor Toby Clare or Pastor?
I don't mind. I don't get hung up on titles.
I'll just call you, I know you as Toby, so I'll call you that. But yeah, Toby actually gave me studies when I came back to church as a 20-something-year-old, and we were part of a church plant together on the Gold Coast, and we also traveled around the Middle East and Europe together for a little while on a Bible Lands trip. So we've had some good times together. Hey, Toby.
We sure have, yeah. And I can remember back to that day when I first met you in a Bible study at Kingscliff Church, and yeah, no, we definitely have had some cool adventures over the years, definitely.
It's been good. Well, Toby, for anyone who doesn't know you, do you just want to give us a little bit of an insight into what your life looks like at the moment?
Okay, so life for me at the moment is the life of a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. I am currently working for the South New South Wales Conference, and I look after the two churches that are located in Wodonga. And it's a little bit of a quirk because of the fact that all the churches are located actually physically in Victoria. We are part of the South New South Wales Conference due to a little quirk there of the boundary line. Yeah, and so I've been working at these churches since the beginning of 2020. So I don't really count the 2 years of 2020 and 2021 because down here they were very, very challenging and didn't really get to do much in the way of ministry on this side of the border, at least during those years. So, but yeah, I guess that's a little bit about what I'm currently doing. Yeah, and thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah, because your church is literally smack on the border. Well, Albury, yes. Isn't it? Hey.
Yeah. So we've got two towns here. It's a bit like our old stomping ground of Tweed, Coolangatta. We've got Albury and Wodonga, and functionally they exist as one town, even though they're technically two towns. And yeah, there's 3 churches here on the border plus a K-12 school. And yeah, it's been a privilege of mine to sort of work amongst all of those different entities here on the border, and it's been really cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, people might not know this about you, Toby, but and you're probably too humble to say this about yourself, but you're a bit of a jack of all trades. I would say, like I tell people often that you're like the most human version of an encyclopedia that I know. But you've also previously worked as a mechanic and you've done a bit of social work. And you could have jumped into any kind of field, really. But why is it that you chose to become a pastor?
That's an interesting question because, yeah, you're right. There's been quite a number of different things throughout the course of my life that have taken up my time. And like in reflection, I can see that God was always leading me towards pastoral ministry. And I guess I was very reluctant, I would say. I was a Jonah in relation to that, because I think probably the first time that I would have ever had somebody suggest to me that perhaps I should go and study to become a minister, my initial internal thought was that would be the worst job in the world. And it took quite a lot of time and quite a number of years for God to actually bring me around to the idea that, yes, this is actually what I want for you. And so, yeah, but all those different things, I can see that God's been able to use them, while perhaps that my journey may not have been quite God's perfect will for my life. I can see that he's actually been able to use it to his glory and to bring me into a position in ministry where I think I've probably got a fairly well-rounded approach, and I've got some life experience to be able to help to relate to people with.
What do you mean by that well-rounded approach? Do you think your previous occupations have kind of helped you in ministry?
Yeah, I do actually. I know working as a mechanic really helped me with patience. Something that God knows I need help with. And working in the, I guess, like I knew probably when I was probably in my mid-20s that God wanted me to work with people, but I just hadn't figured out in what capacity yet. And so my time of working with people was preparing me, I guess, for what I consider to be the ultimate of working with people, i.e. helping them with their spiritual journeys. So yeah, I think all those little bits and pieces together have helped me to become the pastor that I am now.
Yeah, awesome. You've obviously been a part of a number of different kinds of churches. Like we've mentioned that you were a part of a church plant here in Tweed Heads. You are a pastor of 2 different churches at the moment, which I would say are quite different in style or approach. And then you've obviously been a part of others and pastored a lot of others as well. Taking that all into consideration, what do you kind of believe that the church exists to be or to do?
So ultimately, the church exists to serve and to serve the community that it's located in, and to, I guess there's many different ways to do that. And I suppose that's something that we'll get into as we chat this afternoon. But the church's purpose ultimately is to spread the good news. I mean, Jesus left behind very clear instructions. He said, go make disciples, baptize them, teach them. And that is the responsibility of the church. There's no one else is going to do it. And, like it or not, there's all sorts of other different rabbit holes that we can jump down if we so choose. But as church, it's our responsibility to take the good news to the world, which is pretty daunting when you think about it.
It is daunting, yeah, totally. But as you've been, I guess, a part of different churches, have different churches approached that in like a different way?
Yeah, look, I think the vast majority of churches are different from each other. You probably don't find any cookie cutter churches, I wouldn't think. I would think that the vast majority of them do things. Every church has got its own style, and every church has got its own strengths and weaknesses, and that's a good thing. Like that's a God-given thing, I think. That all churches are different.
Are there any things that you've seen? This is maybe like a 2-pronged question, but as you've been a part of different churches, are there things that you've seen consistently that most churches are doing pretty well? And then on the other hand, are there things that you kind of see consistently that you're like, why are so many churches doing this? Because I think churches are probably a bit like humans in the sense that sometimes we get into habits that are not really serving us well, but we just keep doing them because we don't really know that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, I think it's, like you say, it's probably a bit of a multi-pronged question. As far as things that we're doing well, I think generally speaking, we teach the word fairly well. I think, and generally speaking, I think that's the case, that we generally teach fairly well. In terms of the fact, at least, that we're willing to share the knowledge that we have, and I think we'll probably get more into the specifics of better ways and maybe not so great ways to actually do that. But in terms of the willingness to share, I think generally speaking, most churches are willing to share the truth of the gospel. That would probably be the basics of it, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember the other aspects of the question, I guess.
I think the other aspect was more like on the flip side, maybe what are some things that churches aren't doing very well, but that they might not really be aware of?
Yeah. Okay. I think one challenge that I've seen in a few churches that I've been a part of is, and I would say that this is unconsciously done. I don't think it's deliberate, but I think that there can be a tendency to put up barriers that actually hinder people from getting a clear glimpse of Jesus. And like we read about in the Gospels, when the Greek people came to see Jesus, and they couldn't actually get to him because he was in the temple, and there was this actual physical barrier called the sorek that was preventing them coming in to see Jesus. And I think that sometimes we can put up metaphorical or invisible barriers that can actually hinder people from seeing Jesus, and we probably don't realize that we're doing it. And I know I've been guilty of that in the past, I'm sure. And when we read, in Paul's writings where he talks about Jesus came to tear that sorek down, that I think to me is a sort of a clear instruction from Scripture that we've got to try and remove whatever obstacles that may be there. And it's hard if we don't actually recognize them. If that's probably another challenge, I think, is actually recognizing that maybe those obstacles do exist. And because unless you know that they're there, well, how can you help to pull them down?
Yeah. Well, how can churches kind of become a bit more aware of the barriers that they have? Is a survey kind of the best, or how have you seen do that?
I think one of the things to help us see, because I mean, you would probably be aware of the Joe Harry window.
Yes.
And
the explainer, I love that. It's really helpful.
Well, you'll have to help me explain it, because I can't remember the 4 quadrants, because there's one where things are known to us and known to others. That's the open part. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's another where it's known to others but not to us. I can't remember what that side's called. Can you remember what that side's called?
Oh, I don't know what the names of them are called, but I know the idea.
And then there's another section that's like the private side, where it's like known to us but not known to others. And then there's the part of the window where it's not known to anybody and it's yet to be discovered. So I think sometimes we can be in that situation where there's things that we don't know about ourselves, but other people can see it. And so that's why I know up in North New South Wales, and they have done it down here in South New South Wales as well, they've had the Mystery Worshipper Initiative. Yeah. And I think that that's perhaps one practical way that churches can actually help to see perhaps if there are some barriers that they might be putting up that they're completely unaware of. The mystery worshipper can actually, that's one way that I suppose you could help see perhaps things that might be there that you don't recognize.
Can you give us an example of what one of those modern day barriers might be for a church, or one that you've seen?
Perhaps a difficulty in growing community. Like community is one of those things that's it's very hard to fake it till you make it. Like I think if a church has a really good community and there's a really open and welcoming atmosphere there, when people are actually not just coming together on the weekend only, but they're actually doing things together during the week as well, and they're actually a tight-knit community, that is something that it's hard to create, but once you have created it, that's a real strength. And when people sort of, I guess, come in through the metaphorical doors or the literal doors of the church, they'll sense that straight away. They'll sense whether or not that community actually exists. And if it doesn't exist, I think that can be a real barrier towards people feeling like they're a part of what's happening there in the church. And perhaps another barrier is something even simple like the language that we use. It can be a lot of jargon for somebody who's from outside. I don't know. Have you had any experience in that aspect of the language side of things?
I think because I was raised in a Christian home, it hasn't been as obvious to me. It's probably been more obvious working with Signs of the Times and having to really refine all the articles and the language. And probably Jared's not here, but like I think him pointing out things where it's like, oh, people won't understand this has kind of made me kind of go to church and see things through that different perspective. And I think it's something that if you're a pastor who was or if you're someone in the church who is at the front and who has always been in church, I think it's harder for you to see that. Like you said, it's one of those blind spots. You don't realize that people won't understand that because this is just such a normal part of your language.
Yeah, that's right. And so for me as a pastor, when I'm preaching, and particularly when I know that there's people there who are quite new to Christianity and particularly new to Seventh-day Adventist Christianity, I try to be very conscious of the language that I am using, because I don't want that to be like, I don't want people to be going, oh, what on earth is he talking about? Like, I don't understand that terminology, or I don't understand the language that he's using. Whereas everybody, and if they look around and see, oh yeah, everyone else understands what he's talking about, that can be like a bit of a barrier towards people not only understanding what I'm talking about, but actually feeling like they belong to the community. So that's just one thing. And I mean, even the way we talk about church itself, I think most of the time we forget about the fact that we're not referring to a building, we're referring to a group of people. And that is the definition of church. It is the group of people. It's not the building. I've personally been trying to make sure with my churches here that I refer to, when I'm talking about our building, I refer to our facility. If I'm sending a message out to people and say, hey, we're going to meet at our building or at our facility, just little things like that, I think that can try and help us to shift our approach a little bit to try and bring some of those barriers down for people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think another thing, Toby, and this might help us, I guess, lean into what we're talking about today, is often people kind of present themselves at church in a very perfect and put together way. And, we say this thing all the time that like church is not for perfect people, but then we also show up in our best clothes and in our best like attitude, our best behavior. And we don't really talk about the things that we did wrong through the week or the things we're struggling with. We just kind of gloss over it all. Yet we want it to be a place where people can just come however they are, but we don't really, I guess, present that ourselves. And I guess it leans into what we're talking about today, which is messy church. And I don't know if that's part of the motto that they have at Messy Church as well. But when I hear about messy church, it kind of makes me think about that idea of how we show up to church and what it's for. But do you just want to kind of, I guess, lean us into, what do I mean when I say messy church? What is that from your perspective?
So from what I understand, so messy church it's about a way of doing church. And so I guess you'd say that it falls into the category of practice. And so we have been using Messy Church as an outreach here on the border for about 5 years. And it's just recently sort of come to the end of its current phase, but we will continue in some form in the future. It's a way to approach church that is completely different to the I guess the paradigm that we've inherited from our forebears. And I mean, when you look at the way we do church, typically, we inherited it from the people that the Seventh-day Adventists came from. They inherited it from their forebears. And if you go back far enough, effectively, we inherited it from the medieval church. And so Messy Church is a way to have a church meeting, I guess you'd say, but quite different. And it very much focuses on the experiential and sensory side of things.
Yeah. So Messy Church, for anyone listening, is sort of like it's a worldwide organization, I believe. And I guess it's like an organization that provides resources and tools and ways of doing church. I read their website and I think they said, Messy Church, every month thousands of people of all ages come together to discover Jesus. In over 30 countries around the world, we eat, play, and worship together. And I think that's a cool way of putting it, because play is often left out of, I guess, the church vocab, especially for adults. It's something that the kids do, but it's not really something that we invite adults into. And eat, often is also, every now and then we'll do potlucks, but it's not like a foundational thing. So I thought that's really cool that they put that in there.
I do too.
Yeah. But do you want to paint a picture of us about like what a typical messy church scene would kind of look like?
Yeah, and look, what I will say is that I'm sure that the way we do it is different to the way a number of other people, and a number of other churches have done it. So generally speaking, the way we would do it is we've used it as the major, like a major outreach to our school families at our local Adventist school. And the way we would do it is that a theme or a story for the day would be picked. And a lot of the time it's been, a particular narrative from Scripture. Sometimes, occasionally we've done it on perhaps a more topical approach, but most of the time it's probably been narrative. And so you pick a scriptural story and introduce the story in some way with perhaps songs, maybe a skit or something like that, just so that everybody there understands the basics of what the story is from Scripture. And then the entire group of people are broken up into about 6 groups usually. And then there's a round robin of different activities, and each activity is at a different station. And each station is designed to help families enter, because that's one thing we've always insisted, that families have to do it together. You can't drop your kids and run. This was an event for families. Sorry?
It's a full family affair.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the teenagers to the little ones, and we sort of hope that everyone gets something from the different activities. And there's quite a variety. There'll be games, there'll be crafts, there might be object lessons. We've even had our science teacher from the school, who's quite an enthusiastic supporter of Messy Church, come up with a number of really cool science experiments that actually illustrate different aspects of the story that we're trying to illustrate. And and then at the end, we sort of come together for a final little wrap up, and then we eat together, and that's it. It's very simple.
Simple, fun. How do you find, compared to the traditional way of church, where it's like Bible study and then you sit and listen to a sermon and you sing some songs, how do you find that in contrast to that?
I think that it's accessible to a lot more, because my experience has probably been that most of the time younger kids probably don't listen to the sermon. Now, I'm sure that there is to that rule, but in this particular aspect, you've got even the youngest kids can actually partake in learning more about the Bible story of the day through the different aspects of the the activities that they're doing. And so from that perspective, I think what it does is it just kind of broadens the level of engagement for a typical church service. The other thing that I think is really good about it is that you're combining a number of those aspects, those characteristics of the early church that we read about in Acts chapter 2, and you've got people that are studying the word together, or they're learning together. You've got people that are eating together. You've got people developing closer connections, that koinonia, and you've also got people praying and eating together. So those 4 main characteristics of church are happening in one space, one time sort of thing. So that I think is really cool.
It's probably also awesome because, like you said, you're going back to the stories. And I think sometimes when you go to churches, and this is not a bad thing necessarily, but sometimes the pastor will focus on like a series, or sometimes the pastor will be very philosophical, or they'll be focusing on, like a deeper part of the story instead of just like the basic story. But going back to that basic story is often what people need, especially if they're new to the church. So I think it's probably really helpful for people just in in learning those basics again and coming back to the basic shell.
Definitely. And look, what we've seen is that so the majority of the new families that we've got attending at Wodonga is that Messy Church has been a common denominator for many of our new families. I think of one family in particular that are now quite an integral part of what we're doing at Wodonga. Their previous church, which I think was, I think it might have been a uniting church. I'm probably getting that wrong. They up in Sydney, and they did Messy Church up there. And when they moved down here to Wodonga, the Albury-Wodonga area, one of their key things was they had needed to find somewhere that did Messy Church. That was part of their their regular practice. And so they looked up the website, and what they found was us. And so that was our initial connection point. And there's been multiple connection points, and that's probably another little aside that I'll add there is what we're finding is that there's not just one magic pill for building community. It requires multiple connection points. You might have Messy Church over here, but over there you've got some other type of community building activity. I know that with the younger families in our church, cycling. Now, cycling down here is quite a big thing, whether it be just leisure cycling, whether it be mountain biking. It's a pretty big area for that sort of thing. And so a group that came together regularly to have family bike rides and that sort of stuff, that was another connection point. And then you might have something happening with mums and bubs. So all these different little connection points is really what builds community.
Yeah, I like that. So what you're saying is like for a church, for example, not just to have Messy Church, but also to have other groups that just help connect people and bring them into that community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go.
Oh, I guess it makes sense especially because people have so many different, such different lives. So what's going to be good for one person isn't going to work for another. So it just helps.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't sort of cookie cutter it all. And having that, another thing that I think really helps is to eat together on a regular basis. And I'm convinced from Scripture that it was not an accident that was one of the characteristics of the early church, that they ate together. At Wodonga Church, that's something we do every single week. When we meet together, we eat together. And the way we've set up, even the way we've physically sort of set up our building, is that we put all the food out in the foyer of the church.
Nice.
And you have to walk past it in order to get out of the building.
Yeah.
and it's hard to when you're walking past, because that's one thing Wodonga Church does really, really well. We've got an excellent catering team. And when you have to walk past that in order to exit the building, it's a fairly good motivator and spend some time together.
It's a trap. You can't sneak out past the food. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I remember the church plant that we used to be a part of. Someone always saying, "Well, we've got to eat anyway, so we may as well just eat together." And that was probably a thing we did quite regularly, was just eat together because, well, we got us, so we may as well join. And like you said, it's Jesus did it also all the time. So
and I guess reflecting on our time at the Vine, the church plant up at Tweed Heads, the other thing that I really liked was that people would regularly communicate with each other during the week and let each other know if something was happening. They'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to have a surf and have breakfast afterwards or whatever. And if anyone wants to," and people did. So there was that interaction during the week as well, not just on the weekend. And I think that's another important thing, another important aspect of church too, is that it happens consistently across the week as well as just on the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's those connection points again. It's not just having one interaction per week, but multiple. Yeah, awesome. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, but and for anyone who's interested in Messy Church and wants to know more about that, I've put the link to that in the comments where you can read more about it and get resources and so on. But Toby, just to end, we like to end things on a practical note on Record Live. And I know not everyone might be in the position to start a Messy Church at their own church or something like that, but what's something that I guess you've taken away from that people could kind of take into their own communities?
So one of the things that I'd really encourage people is to look for a need or a gap within your community. That I think is really something that I think is very important. And it was it was instrumental for us when we were starting the Messy Church ministry. But yeah, there's no point in us trying to meet a need that doesn't exist in our community, or it might be an area where we think, oh, we could do this well, but there is somebody else in the community doing it really well also. Perhaps we're better off to look somewhere else in that case. But yeah, I think finding one need within your community and meeting that need well, I think is a really good place to start. Serving your community in such a way that that they know, oh, these people are Seventh-day Adventists. They're Seventh-day Adventist Christians, and they're not here. They're not trying to do something underhanded or anything like that. They are just here to share the good news about Jesus and to meet a need, that exists in the community. I think that's really important. Just finding the need and doing what you can to meet it.
Yeah, I think something that I once heard, which I found helpful, was if your church was to close, would the community around you actually realize? Would they know that you've shut the doors, and would they feel that kind of impact?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sort of what you're saying there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Toby, thank you so much for coming on. It's been cool to hear more about Messy Church. If anyone would like to check out more, you can just go to the link in the comments. And yeah, it's great to have you on, Toby. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Sunita. I really appreciated it.
Later.